Hello and welcome to another episode of Growing Up B2B. I'm your host, Ed Dalia, the second generation president of Dalia Associates, the growth advisory and activation firm focused exclusively on family owned B2B companies. Today, I'm joined by Sarah Switlik, president of Switlik Survival Products. Founded in 1920, Switlik has spent more than a century designing and manufacturing life-saving equipment used around the world, from aviation and marine safety to military and special mission applications. Along the way, the company has become synonymous with innovation, quality, and American manufacturing in its category. Sarah represents the fourth generation of family leadership, but her journey into the business wasn't predetermined. After studying at Babson College, she had other plans before her father approached her about joining the company. Over the past 13 years now, and through a thoughtful, multi-year leadership transition, she's helped guide Switlik through facility expansion, operational transformation, new product development, and some entry into new commercial markets. Today, as president, Sarah is helping write the next chapter of a family business that's been protecting lives for more than 100 years. Sarah, welcome to Growing Up B2B.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I was so psyched to have you on. What an amazing story and some amazing history, which hopefully we'll touch on in our conversation as well. But for those listeners who are not so familiar with Switlik Survival Products, would you take a moment and tell us in your own words what the company is all about and the markets you're serving today?
Yeah, of course. So Switlik has, as you mentioned, has always had some historical elements of being a manufacturer in Trenton. First and foremost, we're a manufacturer. We've made a lot of different things over the years, but predominantly they've skewed towards the safety and survival equipment, life-saving appliances, realm.
Mhm.
Everything previously from parachutes, to getting into aviation protection, and then evolving up to other things with the military. And today I usually start out with telling people, we're one of a couple companies that makes the yellow life vests under your seat on an airplane. We make a lot of life rafts and dry suits and other life preservers, for flotation in a water disaster or protection from the elements. So if you end up in the water, in a disaster environment or in an emergency, it's likely that you either have some of our gear or that the people rescuing you might have some of our gear on or use it to perform that rescue.
It's amazing. And are you, so it sounds like you're working both uh with military as well as with commercial based
Yeah, so
application.
we do a little bit of everything. We have a lot of government contract business. We sell to all the branches of the U.S. military and a lot of foreign militaries. And then we do a lot of B2B business, like I said, to the commercial airlines, to helicopter, oil and gas offshore. And we do have a small kind of ebbs and flows, the direct to consumer business. So for general aviators, private aviators, people with boats that want life rafts, we used to sell man overboard modules. We just transferred some of that. But so it's a little bit of everything, but predominantly B2G and B2B.
Hmm. Understood, understood. So the company, I mean, when you look back, just has such a remarkable and interesting history, including, from what I understand, an early connection to Amelia Earhart. So for you, when you walk in each day, what does that mean to lead a company with that kind of legacy? How does that feel for you?
I think it's remarkable. It's really nice to know that my great grandfather, he definitely was the traditional American dream story and journey. And it's, it's just nice. It's easy, makes the company easy to talk about. It makes it easy to be passionate about what we're doing, both from the products that we make, but also from the history that we do have and the cool stories and connections. So it's nice that when we can talk about what we're doing internally or externally, that there is a story attached to it, and there's a lot of historical context and knowledge. It also helps kind of solidify that we're here, we've been here, and we're here to stay, and that we're resilient to the best of our ability, and that's nice too to know that there's a lot to look back on. pressure on that to make sure I
Oh,
mess it
of
up.
course.
But at the same time, we have I'm very fortunate. We have a very strong foundation.
And just out of curiosity, by any chance did Amelia sign a parachute when she was doing some
Uh,
testing with the
no, we do
company?
have we have a lot. We have pictures and stuff of her wearing, her parachute that says like. But my great grandfather actually had partnered with her husband, G.P. Putnam,
Hmm.
and that was how they designed the parachute jump tower more as an amusement park ride. But then it ended up being something that they introduced to the Army, and that's when parachutes in World War II, became involved. But no, we do have a good amount of Amelia pictures and other things here.
That's amazing. But going back in time a little, when you were growing up, you kind of knew that the factory was there, but the family business wasn't really discussed openly at home. And when you look back, why do you think that was, Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit of, separation from it just to make sure that my dad and his siblings, and stuff could unplug a little bit. I'm also the youngest grandchild on in the Switlick side, so I kind of came behind a lot of what they had going on. But I think, some of it was like just like you said, it was, you know what your dad does, that, and I knew that there was a factory because we came here and those types of things. And I loosely knew what they were doing, but he also wanted to always make sure that there was never a sense of pressure to come in to the business, unless it was a choice or a genuine interest or something like that. So I think that was also part of it, was making sure he could leave work at work,
Hmm.
just like other people that don't have family businesses have the liberty to do, as well as having it be around us, but not, an expectation, let's call it, to go in.
So when you go home tonight, do you leave work at work or does work
I
sometimes
have to
follow
leave
you?
work. I do. I have to leave it here, because I have small children and, a whole lot of, obviously, I don't ever really turn completely off, but I have definitely, there's a compartmentalization that's required, and we, being a factory based as well, what we say to people, that's kind of the work-life balance benefit,
Hmm.
of there's always more that can be done, but I have to set that example for everybody as well.
Well, it sounds like a healthy practice that perhaps was somewhat influenced from what you observed in dad.
Definitely.
So you know, after your upbringing, you went to Babson College, and your plans at the time, as I understood, it, didn't necessarily involve or include joining the family business. So talk about that and talk about what ultimately changed your mind about that.
Yeah, so you're correct. I went to business school because I wanted to do other things in business. I had an interest in finance and other areas, and Babson's great because it teaches you entry level all business all across the board your first 2 years, regardless of the specialty. So that gave me a chance to realize that I didn't actually want a job in finance or on, on Wall Street. But I got into marketing and global business management. And but I didn't take advantage of their family business programming. As you said, it wasn't directly the vision. But when I was a senior and throughout those times, I'd started to share some of what I was learning in my classes with my dad. And we started to develop that relationship that was more talking about business, and,
Hmm.
and it changed the tone a little bit. And then that timing, was when my dad approached me to say, if he ended up taking over the business, would I ever have an interest, um, in coming in? And if I said yes, that was okay. If I said no, that was okay. It just would help guide some of his stuff. And I said, it's more curious to me than it, was in previous times, but I still am not 100% sold. I'd like to work somewhere else. I'd like to work with the degree that I've received. but we can keep in touch on the topic, kind of
Hmm.
thing. And then I worked in New York for a couple of years. I did digital marketing. I worked at Brooks Brothers and did, then some more administrative stuff. And then my dad approached me again and said, okay, well, if you there's a marketing job open at Switlick, which it was important to me that I wanted to, start where I was, and I probably have 5 to 10 years, in me before I think about slowing down a little bit. So, which is a small runway in the grand scheme of things. But and so if you are going to come in, I think now would be a good time to come in and see. And I was looking for a career change at that point anyway. So that made sense at the time. And then slowly worked my way up, worked our way through the transition. And then after several years, when there was more definitive buy-in all the way around, was when we kind of turned up the heat on the transition a bit.
Understood. And out of curiosity, do you have a sense of whether your dad was it kind of either expected or did he like his joining the business? Was that kind of an expectation at that time, or was that something that he wanted? Have you guys ever
So
talked about that?
he was in the business with his brothers,
Hmm.
while his dad was here and while his grandfather was here, and I think so. It was a bit more, outlined that he went to school and studied engineering, and so he came into the business on the product side and did engineering, whereas my other uncles were in some sales and marketing,
Mm.
and stuff. So he did come directly here from school, and I do believe it was a little bit, it was definitely more talked about, that from one generation to the next. So that was a different experience.
Yeah, it seems that the previous generation sometimes I don't want to say it's an expectation, but it's heavily leaned into it would seem
Yeah,
like hey, this is a good idea, why don't you do this? Whereas when you came along you very much had a choice, you know
yeah,
um, and I love the takeaway about keeping the lines of communication open, especially for those listeners who are at that crossroads where you were at one point, where I was at, where all of us who picked up the baton were at. Do I join? Do I do my own, go a different path, or do I go a different path now, but keep that door open, which is precisely what you did, and seemed to work out pretty well.
yeah. It was nice that it was not pressure based,
Mhm.
because the only way that it was going to work was if it was a choice. Leaning from obligation doesn't doesn't have the same longevity at times.
Sure. So, since stepping into the leadership role, and I'm sure you've made a number of decisions, but if you think about one that stands out, an important growth decision that the company has made under your leadership, what might that be?
So one of the biggest projects that we went through when I was transitioning more into the chief operating officer role, pretty much my previous role, from just mostly sales and marketing, was that we had to transition from legacy IT to an ERP, system, and a more tech system. And that was hugely change management. That was a really big project. It forced me to touch all of the departments and areas through business process review, and then ultimately implementation, and kind of leading the team through that, project, because my dad and a couple of the people from his, generation, the legacy generation, they said intellectually we know that this needs to happen because of the size and complexity of the business, but we don't want to deal with, but we know that there's a painful project. So, that would be a good thing. And it's definitely helped have more of a data and analytical view for us. And it's forever a work in progress. But
Mhm.
that was one of the biggest things. The other thing that's happened that my dad started and I'm building upon is that kind of allowing for depth in the departments. There were times where we were very lean and our staff aged up because they were here for a long time, which was nice. But then each departure felt pretty significant. So
Mm,
we said the only way to grow is to get a few, get some more
mm,
depth in areas, but that costs a lot to carry more heads. And so then that means we need to grow
mhm.
to feed the beast. So
Sure.
those have been kind of some things that have helped us with regards to the growth side of the company.
Yeah, for sure. Um, and tricky questions to answer from a timing standpoint is do you build the town and then grow, or do you grow and then say, all right, let's figure out how to get the work done now? Um, I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer, but I would suggest that it's probably some form of a balance that's struck there
Yeah,
as best you
yeah,
can, and it's never going to be perfect, right? Because the right person isn't just sitting outside your door waiting to come in. Although to work for a company like that, maybe they are. I don't
yeah.
know.
I mean,
Pretty
there's
awesome reputation.
definitely plenty of turnover.
Hmm.
Not everybody sticks, but I think then the benefit is that when we do get some solid team members, and they do tend to stay for a while. But it took time in each zone to kind of get to the team that we have today.
Mm. So something that I definitely wanted to touch on because we talked about it prior to this session. Um, it sounds as though you and your father were very intentional about preparing for this leadership transition over a period of years. So, can you talk about that from Sarah? How did you come to making a very kind of thoughtful, intentional approach to that? Because certainly, that doesn't always happen, you know. But in this case, it did. So talk about how that process was established and why it proved to be so successful for the two of you, really.
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple things at play. The succession planning of the prior generation wasn't as clearly mapped out, and
Hmm.
that had its challenges. And so my dad, like I said, he was very intentional about making us choosing a succession plan and having it be known so that we could prepare for it. I mean, he'd
Hmm.
been here for 40 50 years when I came in, and so I was never going to have that runway to know the business like the back of my hand by the time I was in charge the way that he did. The other thing is we were very close. My dad, our relationship, I was close with both my parents, very close with my siblings. And so my mom, she also played a part in there saying, don't let this ruin our family dynamic at all. So we always had an exit ramp, I call it, that kind of pressure relief valve that the relationship came first. And if anything in the business really pushed on it wasn't worth it
Hmm.
at that point, that we would get out. So even just having that, knowing that stuff would have to get really bad to get to that point, but just having that in the background kind of helped. And we had this rule, and easier at times than not, but in general, we had this rule that we had to talk it out. We had, and we'd go to lunch a lot, and he would say this some days, like, do you want to go to lunch? And I would be, no, I was like, well, then today we have to go, we have to go. Those are the most important times to push through and to read each other's emotions, and say that because that it was in his best interest for it to work out for me. But at the same time, making sure that we communicated a lot through it, even when it was hard, or I didn't, either one of us didn't want to or was frustrated. That that wasn't that wasn't worth it.
Excellent, excellent. And it would sound that you'd remarked that the transition from the second to the third generation had gotten a little bit complicated at one point. Would you say that that was really your dad taking a chapter and saying, "Well, that didn't go quite the way it should have. Let me make it go better."
Yeah, he's definitely really strong in learning from past mistakes or past, things and trying to be better for them and seeing what happens when it's not clear, for the succession planning in particular, that's not good for the business side of things, that sometimes you have to blend business and family, but other times you have to separate it, and make choices on behalf of one or the other. So yeah.
Out of curiosity, if you and your dad were at a family gathering, say tonight, okay to talk about business if it comes up, or not okay? Do you have kind of guardrails, or is it more fluid? Like if something's urgent, you're going to talk about it, irrespective of where you are.
Yeah, I would say it's more fluid, a lot of times too, and especially now when my dad's not in the office as frequently. He's still, very much in the loop, but then when we are face to face, there will be time, to kind of catch up on some hot spots. But at the same time, if it goes on for too long, or if it gets, tense, if it's just the two of us, we'll talk
Mhm.
about the business more. But in the family environment, not too much. So we kind of keep those barriers up.
So then bring it back to inside the company. Your father's coming in less, but he still remains, I think he's holding the chairman title, right, of the business. And you're now, as president, responsible for leading the business and a lot of the day to day. So, uh, again, was it that same intentionality that established the roles so that, what's preventing you from getting in each other's way or overlapping or, crossing streams? Like, how do you manage that kind of transition of roles now?
Yeah, I think, some of it is he now his participation is much more. He started to be when it was clear that that the transition was more than 75% of the way through, let's call it. We had one or two meetings or offsites where we kind of struggled through, having two leaders in the room, that when I was more hands-on to the day-to-day at that point and trying to align the team to me. But if he's in the room, that especially for people who have been here for longer, he's in charge and there's, two voices, and there we kind of that came to a head a little bit, and he's recognized, again, learning from, the past, even though it was very challenging to step back and let, but if he said, if I want the team to be your team and report to you, then I probably need to step back, or I found
Mhm.
ways to say it's challenging, when you're in the room, even if you're just, observing or listening, at times,
Sure.
and understandably so, it's still your business. But maybe we can do a little bit more of kind of running stuff through me to them. And so that's worked. The other thing is he's really phenomenal still on the product side, the historical context of the products and the designs and the mechanics and engineering, which is not a strength of mine, per se. So using him for more of that kind of historical context and knowledge, or more still on the R&D development side, as well as the historical trends and financial, of things to look at and things to review. But we do a lot more of me to him and then me to the team, versus both, because once the transition was most of the way there, it started to be apparent that it was more of a hindrance, and it's like I said, alignment of the team. He was able to be big enough to say they're looking at you now and they're not looking at me, but it's not because they don't respect me anymore. It's because we want them to be looking at you, and so make that work. But again, it's didn't happen overnight, and it was it's a
Yeah.
slow burn, to make that transition.
Well, it sounds like at the core, based on how you're describing it, and I've not met your dad, but it sounds like the two of you going into all this had a very strong relationship, and there was that, openness of communication from the start that she carried forward. And I think also a healthy respect for each person's position. Like, you have the challenge of transitioning and learning to lead the organization. He had the challenge of learning to step back and let you do that. I think sometimes we as next gen leaders sometimes underappreciate um, how much of one's identity and persona can be tied up into the business. Um, that the idea of letting go is a lot harder than one might think. It's very hard, just as much as it's hard to take the baton and step forward as you have, as so many of our guests have. Um,
Definitely.
but really, I think the biggest takeaway is open lines of communication, even when you're not sure if hey, I may or may not take this path, but let's keep talking. I think that
Right.
was such a healthy takeaway. So, looking back across the span of years, every generation, it would seem, inherits a different challenge. So your great grandfather, he, had the fortitude to build this company. Your father's generation had to wrestle with some of the challenges of succession and working that out. When you look at your path and your leg of the journey, Sarah, what do you think is going to be the defining challenge of you as the fourth gen?
Yeah, I've looked at that a lot. I think some of it is the structure of a business where, we have a larger head count and a lot going on now at this size. And so the compliance element and, that side of needing to be a little bit more intentional in our structure and procedures. And that's sometimes hard to implement. That's one thing of just how to keep all the plates spinning
Mm-hmm.
here is that's going to be required. But really, my concern or my thing that we're going to really have to work on is the workforce development in the maintaining the trade skills, particularly in our trade of we still have a lot of sewing. Sewing's our biggest operation, other heat sealing and taping and things that are still very much hands-on manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
And in the area, there's not as many sewers and things like that we have available, and making sure that the trades remain at the forefront, and trying to figure out not about to be prepared for the employment crisis in the next 3 to 5 years, but it's 10 years, so the true future generation, and making sure that we can still find and train people on our skill set, since it's definitely not as robust around here as it used to be.
Yeah, no, a common theme echoed by those of our guests that have been in some form of either advanced or very specialized manufacturing. It takes a certain skill set that's sometimes just not readily available in terms of the next generation coming up, and sometimes it's got to be developed, you know.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's in New Jersey. We're not going anywhere from New Jersey. We've always been here, but it's a tough business climate at times, with regards to a lot of the regulations and things like that in the States. So again, made the cost and remaining competitive,
mhm.
both from the labor standpoint and just the operational standpoint, will be more of the challenge that I have than prior.
And as I understand it, you've already taken on a number of challenges in the leadership role. Facility expansion, we were talking a little bit about some operational improvements, even some new product development. So, how do you, in your mind, kind of find that balance of preserving this 100+ year legacy while continuing to innovate?
So my dad tells this story to a lot of people with pictures in the conference room here that he says they could either look like historical images of, various stages of our products and, Amelia Earhart and things like that. Or you can consider that in its time, each one of these waves was innovative. And even if now it feels like a legacy product. It was innovative when it first came out, and so that's really kind of baked into our MO here, that we still are doing innovative things, and we have to be doing innovative things because we're not in an environment that is set up for commodities, because we're not going to be the low cost solution. So I think it's knowing that even if some stuff feels old, it once was new, and we have to keep coming up with new things to be so lucky that 15, 20 years from now it looks old. So, I think that's kind of what drives us, is knowing where things came from and where they were when they launched, versus where they are now. It enforces the continuous improvement kind of mindset.
Mhm. And as a if I put my consumer hat on or potential user, and hopefully I'll never have to use one of your products, because that
I
would
hope
probably
so
mean
too.
something went really badly. But I would sincerely hope that whatever the entity was, whether it be an airline or marine craft, didn't go with the low cost provider and spent a little more for quality at that moment.
Yes.
That's
Oh,
for sure. Yeah. And especially when you're about to jump out of a plane, I think you want to know that there's a quality product that's gonna keep you okay.
yes, exactly. That's what we have to stand behind.
For sure. So American manufacturing, I mean, gosh, if we think about the span of the last 20 to 25 years, enormous change, right? Uh, so when you think about the near future as it relates to American manufacturing or specialized manufacturing, what what are you optimistic about? And I think you kind of talked about some of the concerns or the challenges ahead being potentially talent and workforce that understands the skills that are needed. But what on the upside, what are you optimistic about?
I am optimistic about the manufacturing, kind of, um, I'm trying to think of the best word, but the mindset towards manufacturing, coming off of COVID and going through that experience really kind of showed that manufacturing jobs are truly stable and resilient, and they are a good place to be. And with AI and other things that are coming out, there's other specialties that might have been more attractive to, my generation or my parents' generation, saying that we should go into some of these other jobs, that now are a little bit more at risk. But I kind of said, that regardless of regardless of how advanced the tech gets, unless we all walk around empty-handed and with nothing on, there's still going to be a whole bunch of stuff that has to get made.
Hmm.
And that there's things that are going to need to be used, and domestic manufacturing, when you look at the trades of, trading around the world, that I do think that there's kind of a wave going, that maybe there was some stigmatism towards manufacturing for a while, of either it being a hard job, or a job that's just going to get shipped away. So go do that. I think we sell that there's a lot more stability, work-life balance opportunities with what we're doing, and the trades, I think, they are gonna come back. People are gonna realize that we need to refocus on how to actually put stuff together and do stuff.
I
Um,
would certainly hope so, because I don't think there's a single um, leader of a specialty manufacturing operation. And this is, boy, we just have too much good talent. We have more than we know what to
I
do with.
know.
Every single one is saying, we need more skills, we need more talent, we need more training, we need to prepare for the generation that's about to retire and make sure that there's people in place behind them that know what to do. And so, yeah, I think definitely going to be a lot of activity there. And I think you're right. I think the perception of manufacturing is most certainly has made a shift in the last, I would say, maybe 5 years or so, to the positive, where people are saying, yes, that is a viable path, and I should consider that because I can do well there. So hopefully those wins will continue to drive you
Yeah,
forward.
no, and and then you have to be. you have to be optimistic. I have to be a cheerleader here about it. And like I said, I think there's also a shift towards the beauty of stability.
Hmm.
That people, when there's so much that is unknown, that that we're being steady as you go is not a bad thing, and
Hmm.
we were able to provide that. So.
So when we talk about technologies, and certainly you know a big topic, just about every single one of our guests has touched on it, is AI. But in the space of manufacturing, there's also automation, and then other advanced manufacturing techniques. As these continue to evolve, how will you decide which innovations are worth pursuing and which ones might be construed as more, this is just a distraction, this is not for us?
Yeah, it's a big initiative that I have going on right now. We say that we have to get better at saying no, which is a lot harder actually than saying yes to things, and finding the fine line between being really customer service friendly and willing to do, a unique variant, or being willing to work with a customer on what they need, but then also not being, going down every single rabbit hole. So we look a lot at stuff that, where does our competitive moat still stay up? Where is there stuff that we're doing that there's a decent barrier of entry, because we are specialized, and some of our skill sets would be harder to establish from scratch, or a lot of the government, even just being in contracting and understanding how that works. So we're going to go after stuff that allows us to kind of flex the muscles that are strong for us,
Mhm.
allows us to be to be in our sweet spot, which is not, we don't want to be, like I said previously, in the commodity space. That's that's not necessarily our space. We are more specialized, and also going after people who, as you said earlier, still value projects where it's clear that the customer still values the quality. They will buy into our value proposition. There are people that are going to know they have to use the gear, expect to have to use the gear, take it
Mhm.
seriously, need it to work, so that we can back up our quality side, rather than when a market becomes something that they're just buying because somebody told them they have to have it, but they'll never, need it, and is what they tell themselves. Then that's not necessarily for us, and we just have to be smarter about, even if it's we sell two of something or 1,000 of something, the development of it is, that. So we look a lot at opportunity cost
Mhm.
as well. Um,
I love the way you frame that. And as a company that studies growth, I can honestly attest to what you said, that companies that truly scale are ones that are better at saying no than saying yes, and knowing
I talk a good game. It is hard.
it
It's
is
hard.
hard. Yes, it
It's
is.
a big ship that we're trying to turn, but
Yeah.
we're definitely getting more thoughtful, on what we do and don't take on.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean you can't take calculated risks and explore, a new market entry or a new product opportunity. It just means that, you know, you're asking a lot of questions like, is it in our lane? Does it make sense? Does it make business sense? Is it right for our people? Do we have the right talent to do this? Or could we? And then, being okay to step away and say, no, not a good idea right now, you know. And you're right, it is hard. It is hard. I can honestly say in my career, I've stepped in those pitfalls many a time by saying, yeah, let's go for it. And oh, maybe not. Oh, well. So another thing you talked on about before we got on was this idea of really creating a more aligned and energized and a values-driven culture. So talk about that a little bit, Sarah, and why and how is culture showing up as a competitive advantage for Switlick today?
Yeah, I mean, I truly believe that culture and, the mindset, the enthusiasm of your employees is one of the true, last, because I always say anybody can hire smart people, and depending on where you are, that you could hire based on that. But if people care about coming to work, if they care about what they're doing, if they're bought in, and especially in the next, generation coming up, where there is this kind of more realization that, especially in places where you report to the office, like ours, you spend more time with people here than you do at home.
Hmm.
And that sense of community is really important, and that, having a defined culture, something that can band us together, does become the competitive advantage, because especially now in today's, when you can create content or generate, or, like I said, anybody can look up information. But it's more about how can you feel that there was passion behind it. You can
Hmm.
feel that people like talking about being here. And it also was important for me to establish some of the values and then live them, to kind of say that this was the era that how I'm going to lead the company, and put my own stance on it. And so we started to do a lot more town hall gatherings. I started bringing in translators, for some, realizing how many of our, I'm learning more Spanish, that, just realizing, because people care a lot more about what they're doing, and we need, especially in the products we make, um, we need people to value what they're doing and what they're working on, because it matters that it works.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, not only are you leading as the fourth gen, but you're also raising two young children. So, talk about that for a moment. How is becoming, to what extent has becoming a parent changed the way you think or approach leadership or legacy?
Yeah, my therapist always, or coach, she always said that becoming a mother was the best management training you could get, because you do realize that you have to be firm but fair, so, and I always tell people I have two kids at home and like 170 kids here, that a mother had, but it also helps with the compartmentalizing. I feel like it allows you to prioritize. It helps you learn pretty quick what does and doesn't need your, attention. The whole kind of like, how many different types of cries, like, oh, that's a fake cry, or like that's a real cry. And because you just don't have time for all of that. So I think that's transferred over here. It's helped me to prioritize. It's given me good perspective. And it's helped a lot with the work life balance, kind of setting the tone. As I said before, I don't leave stuff here completely, and I definitely have, thoughts going at all times. But when you get somewhere else and there's two completely different, the second shift of who needs you and what, that allows that to kind of park different topics, pick them back up. So I think
Yeah.
compartmentalizing and prioritizing is definitely something that I've gotten better at, out of necessity, but also
Mhm.
to my benefit.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of those are two great takeaways. And as a father of twins, early on, I definitely had to learn how to be more efficient with my time.
Yeah.
And not waste time on things, but rather say, all right, let me get this done so I can get home and start the progression of bottle making.
Yeah.
Um, but that's great. So if you look out further out, say 5 years, where do you hope the company will be sitting, say 5 years out, or even if you wish to look at a broader vista, say 10 years out?
I mean, the easiest answer, because it's also genuinely true, is I hope we're still in business. Again, towards that kind of stability. I hope that we're still growing organically, and like I said, kind of remaining specialty, remaining business. We've got a strong backlog, and that, we're still putting out new stuff. But I think in the chaos of the world, right now, and knowing that it's hard to do 1, 3, 5 year planning, outside of just having general guardrails. I in all seriousness, I do hope that we're just, still a thriving operation. I hope that we've gotten more optimized and better operations, and we've found some new stuff because we have a couple product lines that are resilient, but definitely not on, the front half of their horizon anymore.
Hmm.
But we're really focused on just, kind of keeping on for right now, which
Awesome.
requires growth and requires all those things just to survive. But I have no shame in saying that I will feel successful as long as we can keep providing for everybody that's here.
Awesome. Awesome. And if we went out to the future and say did a look back on your, as a fourth generation, your contribution, your stewardship of the business, what would you hope people would say that Sarah Switlick contributed to this organization?
Yeah, I hope that it would be a lot of people saying that I definitely did a, good job about keeping everybody wrangled, that we've kind of grown the next generation, that we allowed for new ideas and new mindsets to come in. That we were able to keep to I do feel really proud of the culture and the values, and making this a place that people truly want to be, and it's never going to have 100% of the people saying like, yes, I'm at work, again, but on the flip side, making it a place that people want to be, that we can continue doing that, and that I'm encouraging the growth and the opportunities for everyone, regardless of, race, gender, age, background, and where they've come from, because we do a lot of internal growth and new opportunities. And I'm proud of that there's people that want to advance themselves and that I can help make that happen.
And as I'm thinking about your organization, I mean, you must have quite a wide spectrum of workforce, from those that are on the more veteran years, those that are just coming up, those in between. So you're on a daily basis interacting with probably three or four different demographics from an age
Oh,
standpoint.
it's a total melting pot. But it's nice because I do feel like it and our global customer base and our global, things, and just
Yes,
so traveling around the world to talk to people using our stuff. I think it allows me and others to keep a good head on our shoulders about, that respect and appreciation of having nobody's allowed to have too narrow of a focus. And if we're all, as long as we're all on the same team, once we're inside the building, I don't really care where you came from or how you got here.
awesome, awesome. Well, I feel like we could be talking for hours, if not days. Such a fascinating company, and the work that you do is, I mean, you're in the business of saving and preserving lives. So certainly fulfilling work too in that regard. But last question for you. Sarah, if any of our listeners wanted to connect with you to learn more about your story or to learn more about Switlick survival products, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, so and thank you so much for having me on today. It was a great chat. Our website has a lot of information, so switlick.com, and we're working constantly to have that be more of a tool. And that also has the contact information of how to just kind of get in touch with the general group or with me directly. I got to give a shout out to my marketing girl for all of her social things in a couple different channels that we're on. And we love all the followers and things we can get there. But our website is really a strong home base. And then anybody can feel free to contact us.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, to wrap up, Sarah, what really stands out in your story is that successful succession isn't simply about just passing the baton. It's really about preparing for the next generation, learning from the successes and challenges of the previous generations, and building enough trust that that leadership can evolve across time, but being very intentional about that evolution. For family-owned manufacturers especially, this means balancing heritage with innovation, preserving values while you do embrace change, and investing in people just as much as the products you make. So Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your story and perspective. Again, we've been speaking with Sarah Switlick, president of Switlick Survival Products, and I'm your host, Ed D'Elia, and this has been another episode of Growing Up B2B. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we'll see you next time. Sarah, thanks so much for sharing your story today.
Yeah, of course.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to Growing Up B2B. To explore more episodes and insights, visit podcast.delianet.com. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice. Having worked with hundreds of family-led businesses across my career, and being a second-generation leader myself, I'm on a mission to help every family business I meet achieve next-level growth for their organization. So feel free also to connect with me on LinkedIn and let's support each other. You can also find out more about my company at delianet.com. Again, I'm your host, Ed D'Elia, and thanks so much for joining us today. Take care.